Here we are at the Microlise 2019 Transport Conference. I'm joined by Joan, a former Traffic Commissioner, and one of the most recent things she was doing was helping us pick the Driver of the Year for the Microlise Driver of the Year Awards, which were presented last night. One thing we both found quite interesting, I think, Joan, was the number of lady drivers who were successful. I don't know what the overall proportion of lady drivers in the industry is, but they were certainly overrepresented in the awards last night. What did you make of that? Is that a good sign?
I was very delighted when we were doing that judging together, Steve, just a few weeks ago, when we got all the entries, and obviously we didn't know the identity of the individuals by name at all, but I was very delighted that out of the winners that we collectively chose, that there were so many female drivers. Being a female driver is not easy always. In my role as Traffic Commissioner, I would quite often, meet female drivers, and they would tell me some of their experiences. And also I could work it out for myself, because the industry would say, about recruitment, about such like, and I could work out why women weren't going into haulage and such like, because the working conditions sometimes for the guys, we read in your periodical, we'd read about how drivers are treated and the lack of respect. And one of the things I've said time and again in Scotland, where I was the Traffic Commissioner, as you've mentioned, is just how little respect can be shown to the drivers who are absolutely essential. So rather than them being treated as the absolute kings and queens of the road, absolutely essential, totally relied on to deal with all sorts of situations. The ambassadors for companies, when they turn up with deliveries and such like, they report time and time again, and you will have heard it just as I heard it, that they're treated as if they were second-class or third-class citizens. Now, what woman is going to go into a career like that, particularly if she is not going to have facilities to look after herself? We all have human needs. Yes. We all have biological needs. We all want to feel safe. We want to feel respected in the work we do. And I don't think that the customers of logistics, of haulage, are treating drivers, let alone female drivers, well enough. And I don't think the industry, which you write about day in, day out, I don't think it's showing enough respect. I managed to speak to some of the winners last night at the dinner at which they were honoured and treated. And one of the female winners, she said, there's one customer she goes to, and they think it's all right to ask her to go and use the gents' toilets, walk past the urinals, she said. She said she doesn't walk past urinals where men are peeing away.
No, of course not.
Now, what's that about? What is that about? And it's a health and safety thing. So, yes, I think we are seeing some very good exemplars amongst the female drivers, and they've been honoured at this conference by Microlise in these awards, and that is first rate. But there could be more, and there could also be more men drivers. This is where what would be good to bring women drivers in will also benefit in recruiting male drivers, and also retention and respect, just downright respect, Steve. And you'll gather from the passion with which I'm speaking about this. This makes my blood boil, because I hate people being treated poorly.
Yes. Yeah? Is it endemic to the industry? It's not just the transport industry has this problem recruiting young people into the industry, male or female. But transport is a very difficult industry, isn't it? It's long hours. It's away from home. Are there any excuses for transport?
But no, because lots of working life is not easy. We've got the people who go to the rigs. We've got the people who go to do the emergency stuff in the hospitals, 24 hours, 7 days. Lots of working life is not easy. And so in that sense, transport is a provision which is 24/7. It can be involved being away from home. People whose jobs take them away from home, we rely on such people. And for some people, they like that way of life. They like to see the world. They like to have privacy and time to themselves, or sometimes just out of sheer necessity. So I don't think being away from home or doing a 24/7 industry is particular to transport in any way. But I think, as in so many walks of life, it's the respect. is the total respect. Respect in terms of conditions of service, remuneration, and facilities where you're actually treated well.
Yes.
Everything's clean, it's nice. And what's so difficult about that in the 21st century?
I don't know. The continent seems to do it a lot better. If you drive around the continent, there seem to be a lot more public provided rest areas which are clean and well kept. I think in this country we are sort of obsessed with the private sector, aren't we? The private sector has to provide everything, the motorway services. If you go to a motorway service area, as you say, it's not the most particularly pleasant place to spend a night, let alone, to spend your breaks.
Well, it's better than a lay-by, Steve.
Well, it is.
And of course, you're talking about motorway services. That's where your journeys are taking you on motorways. Of course, a lot of journeys will not be on these on the motorways. Will be on a lot of them.
Yes.
It's a curious. I sometimes wonder about Britain. How we do so much that is so good and communitarian in terms of the National Health Service, in terms of free education. All sorts of things we do collectively for each other, which is just first rate and shows that we want everybody to have opportunities and chances.
Yes.
And then we do other things, and you think, what's this about?
Yes.
Why aren't we respecting people in every aspect of their lives?
Yes. When you were traffic commissioner, was that something you could do anything about? Stopping drivers parking in lay-bys for their breaks, sleeping in the cabs? Was that part of the enforcement role that you used to have to make sure the drivers were getting good facilities and good rest, rather than trying to sleep in a lay-by on the A1? Or is that not out of your hands to a certain extent?
That wasn't really my direct responsibility. Sometimes, just like I'm doing an interview with you, I would use the opportunity of my engagement with the industry to make observations about, and to try and chivvy the captains of industry, and to kind of fight for these things for their own people a bit much, and not to ignore it. But coming right back to your question about women, I think just as in, say, we've talked about road transport here, in the other side, where you're passenger carrying, where it's the buses and the coaches, same, not so much the coaches, but certainly in service buses, a lot of women will not join companies that just do the service runs, because again, where are you going to get the breaks?
Yes.
And you and I can go and take a break when we need one.
Yes.
So I think by somebody like me talking about it, I hope a little bit of the message and thinking, and people will think this isn't good enough. And the customers of haulage, they have to be wakened up to the fact that the drivers matter. And if there is a driver who behaves badly, well, that should get fed back to the company that employs him, and that could, I would take a very dim view if I was the employer of somebody who messed up.
Yes. I think you're right. I think the customers have a very important role here, because transport is seen as a commodity service. And so if it's seen as a commodity service by the clients, then inevitably the people who deliver that service are going to be seen as commodities too, aren't they?
Well, one of the reasons, some people ask me, why did you want to become a traffic commissioner? Why did you apply for the job? And one of the passions I have is just how important transport is to our economic well-being. Part of my education, I did a history and politics degree, and I remember we had an excellent lecturer who spoke so much about it was transport. It was the steam engine, it was the railways, and then when you got that opened up the economy and opened up the chance for all of people like us to have the standards of living we've got now.
Yes.
So I've always had this interest in transport as something that gives the economic impetus and wealth, but also opens up opportunities for ordinary folk like you and me, Steve.
Yes.
And so transport has to be right, it has to be there, it has to be getting us places.
Yes.
And how we do it is that involves decisions that can be good or bad for, well, we now think about the environment, but we've got to think about people as well.
I mean, we're here at the Microlise conference. Microlise do telematics. You could argue that telematics is a development of the tachograph, the so-called spy in the cab.
Yeah.
Do you perceive tachographs and telematics as a bad thing for drivers, something to keep a watchful eye on them, or a good thing because it helps improve safety and make sure that they're getting the right rests and that their behaviours are correct? Should drivers be wary of technical developments like this, or should they welcome them?
Again, it depends on how they're presented to drivers, whether they're presented as something that is just another control on them, or as something that liberates them, gives them much better options, keeps them safe. I mean, the tracking of vehicles so that somebody back at base and traffic office knows where the vehicle is, sees if there's something untoward. I think that is very useful for driver and traffic office. So I think it can be very, very liberating. I think the standards of modern vehicles, the comfort of them, is a great thing for drivers. So I think it's how the telematics are presented to the driver, how the driver's brought on hold with it. When we were doing that judging, Steve, I remember some of the discussions we had as judges around the table was this very point about how some of the winners, in fact, I think one or two of the winners and some of the nominees, what had been put on their recommendations to the award was how much they had been hesitant about telematics, had then embraced it, and then they'd been very eager to show their fellow drivers, look, don't resist this is good. I tell you that one thing I did find within not just the drivers when I was traffic commissioner, not just the drivers, but very much the operators, particularly in Scotland, a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises, that you would get people who were scared of computers. A generational thing in some ways. Older operators, older drivers. And so you'd get people probably 45 upwards who could be scared of computers and just feeling that was running away. And I've said to the trade associations over the years, I've said to companies, and I think I said it within our judges' discussions about how organisations like Microlise can do it, is by hand-holding and actually in sort of almost baby talk, saying this is what this means. So you get over the fear thing. It's a bit when you get the first pencil when you're in primary one. What do you do with it? And then gradually you find you can write your name and wow, And I know that might sound as though I'm trivialising things, but not so. Time and time again, operators, who own the businesses or would say, "Oh, I get so and so in the office to do that," or "My son does it." Or even the grandchildren the grandchildren do that. So there is this genuine fear amongst a certain generation who are still very active, still very important, who are scared of the computers, the telematics. And yet, that once you take people down on that journey and you open the box and they see what the magic is, and they see just how liberating it can be, and how they can save the fuel, they can see the attrition on the vehicles, they can see where their people are, they've got another way of doing the tachograph and driver's hours stuff, so it does make it a lot easier. But you need to some people are scared to open the door.
You think these days, as a former traffic commissioner, it astonishes me that people are still coming before you on basic driver's hours infringements. There's so much technology out there now to help people make sure that they stay within the rules, and yet people, as you say, seem afraid of it or don't want to use it. Or is there still an element of people who flout it deliberately just to get the job done?
Of course, there are people who just. There are a lot of people who deliberately don't look at the data. So the data they may have all the kit, and they may have signed up to say Tachomaster or Microlise systems or all sorts of other. So that they can say, so if an examiner calls, they can say, oh yeah, we've got these systems, and so on the face of it, it can look as though they're not non-compliant, that they're trying to be right and everything, but then you find they never ever look. They may never even download. The number of people, operators, have never downloaded their digital data from either the driver cards or the vehicle units. DVSA are finding that. And again, they sort of think, oh, well, we tried it one day, but the computer, the software didn't seem to work with this thing. So we kind of, we thought we'd come back to it later. We didn't. And then, of course, DVSA call and they start to look. And then suddenly a consultant's brought in, or they look. And then when DVSA does look, or a consultant looks, or when it comes to the length of me or my colleagues, you find that perhaps the not looking was rather deliberate. So you get people being very disingenuous about that. And certainly when I came up against that, where people were either willfully or stupidly not doing it properly, what I would do was I might not have needed to go the length of revocation or a suspension, Steve, but one of the things I would have done is I would have curtailed or done something so that the number of vehicles that operator could operate for a given period of time was cut back. And I used to call it recalibrating fair competition.
Yes.
You've deliberately not done this to look at your downloads, to analyse what you're going there. Whatever reason you've done that, you've either not invested in your own training or having somebody in your own office who's trained to do it, or having an outside agency who's trained to do it. So if you saved yourself $1 or $2 there, you're probably doing a bit of ducking and diving. Your competitors who've tried to get a piece of work have not got it because you've undercut.
Yes.
So that's where I recalibrate. I say, you're off the road so many vehicles for a while because the good guys are getting the chance of that work.
Yes.
And I don't care if you lose that work. In fact, I rather hope you do lose that work because I want the good guys back in.
Fantastic. Okay, one final question.
Yep.
Who should issue O licences? Should the traffic commissioners retain responsibility for that? Or should it become a more administrative process and the traffic commissioners become like a court of appeal to revoke the licence?
There's this nonsense. Thank you for asking me that. Without any shadow of a doubt, the traffic commissioners as independent regulators should issue operator licences. Traffic commissioners are gatekeepers. There are people who the compliant industry does not want in. It is easier to keep people out than to try and chase them when they've come in. They've had no intention of being compliant. They may be part of organised crime. They may be people who've been associated with a range of insolvencies, left a trail of debts behind them and whatever. There may be people who have, under different companies or different branding, have flouted driver's hours. They may have been people who've been to prison for driver's hours or worse. I don't want those people. I do not want them on my territory. You know, traffic commissioners, the whole point about an operator licence, Steve, and people sometimes forget it, it's not about a piece of paper. You may think an operator licence, you give somebody a piece of paper. No. What you're doing is you're assessing. The whole point of having regulation, the whole point of having operator licensing is to assess whether that person, company, partnership, whatever, is that company going to be safe from day one? It's not catch up. You've got, the moment you turn a wheel, you have got to have signed up to be safe. And any licensing authority needs to know that if they grant a license, it's not a fingers crossed exercise, or we'll catch them once they've done bad. If you want a license, you've got to have the money. You've got to have the right attitude, so have your systems in place. You've got to have a transport manager that's credible. You've got to have an operating centre that's credible. Then there's a chance that we'll have safe operating.
Fantastic. Superb. Thank you very much indeed, Joan. Very interesting. That's it. Great. Thank you.